The alarm bells rang through the Galactic Coalition headquarters with a sound that made every alien species stop what they were doing. This was not a regular alarm. This was the emergency signal that meant someone was about to die, and die badly. Ambassador. Thane rushed into the main command center, his four arms moving quickly as he tried to understand what was happening. The huge screens around the room showed star maps with red warning lights flashing everywhere. Other ambassadors from different planets were already there, all looking scared and confused. "What is the emergency?" Thane asked the computer operator, a blue-skinned Hexan with 6 eyes. "It's the Valerian system, sir," the operator said, his voice shaking. "They sent out a distress call 20 minutes ago. The signal it's terrible." Thane felt his stomach drop. The Valerians were one of the most peaceful species in the galaxy. They looked like giant praying mantises, but they spent their time growing beautiful gardens on dead planets and making art. They had never hurt anyone in their entire history. If someone was attacking them, it meant something very bad was happening. "Put the message on the main screen," Thane ordered. The room went quiet as the message played. A Valerian appeared on screen, her usually green skin now pale with fear. Behind her, explosions lit up the sky. "This is Elder Kithara of the Valerian Council," she said, her voice breaking. "We are under attack by the Korthak Empire. They came without warning. They are destroying our cities and killing our people. Our defense systems cannot stop them. Please, anyone who can hear this, we need help. We have never asked for military aid before, but we are dying. Our children are dying. Please help us." The message ended, and the room stayed silent for a long moment. "How long ago was this sent?" asked Ambassador Vesk, a tall reptilian from the outer systems. 3 hours, the operator replied. "We've been trying to contact them since then, but there's no response." Thane felt sick. 3 hours was a long time in a space battle. The Valerians might already be gone. "What do we know about this Korthak Empire?" he asked. Another screen lit up with information. The Korthaks were a warrior species that had been growing stronger for the past 50 years. They were about 7 feet tall, covered in thick armor-like skin, and they loved to fight. They had already taken over 12 star systems, and their technology was getting better all the time. "They've been moving toward Valerian space for months," reported the intelligence officer. "We thought they would stop at the border. The Valerians have nothing the Korthaks usually want. No valuable metals, no strategic positions, no weapons." "Then, why attack them?" Vesk asked. "Because they can," said a voice from the back of the room. Everyone turned to look at Admiral Krex, the Coalition's top military commander. His face was grim. "The Korthaks don't need a reason to attack. They do it because they enjoy it." Thane nodded sadly. He had heard the stories about the Korthaks. They didn't just conquer planets, they destroyed them. They killed entire populations, just to watch them die. They were the kind of enemy that gave military commanders nightmares. "Can we send our peacekeeping fleet?" Thane asked. Admiral Krex laughed, but there was no humor in it. "We already tried that 6 months ago when they attacked the mining colonies near Rigel. They destroyed our entire task force in 4 hours. 60 ships, all gone. The Korthaks didn't even slow down." The room felt even more quiet now. The Coalition peacekeeping fleet was supposed to be one of the strongest military forces in the galaxy. If the Korthaks could destroy it that easily, what chance did anyone have? "What about the warrior clans of Altara?" suggested someone. "Tried them," Krex said. "The Korthaks beat them 3 weeks ago, turned their own weapons against them somehow." "The Crystal Guard? Gone." The Korthaks figured out how to disrupt their energy shields. "The Machine Lords?" The Korthaks took over their computer systems and made their robots attack each other. With each name mentioned, the room grew quieter. Every great military force in the galaxy had tried to stop the Korthaks, and everyone had failed. The Korthak Empire was like a disease spreading through space, killing everything it touched. "So what do we do?" Thane asked. "Do we just let the Valerians die?" No one answered. What could they say? The Coalition was supposed to protect peaceful species like the Valerians, but they had no way to fight an enemy this powerful. Then, from the very back of the room, a young aide spoke up. Her voice was so quiet that everyone had to strain to hear her. "What about the humans?" The reaction was immediate. Every alien in the room turned to stare at her with expressions of horror and shock. Some actually backed away from her, as if she had suggested releasing a plague. "The humans?" Thane repeated, his voice barely a whisper. "We don't talk about the humans," Admiral Krex said firmly. "There are rules about this, but they could help," the aide continued, her voice getting stronger. "They're the only ones we haven't asked. Because they're dangerous," Vesk shouted. "Do you know what happened the last time someone asked humans for help?" Everyone in the room knew the stories. The humans had only made contact with galactic civilization 50 years ago, but in that short time, they had caused more chaos than any other species in recorded history. There was the incident with the human diplomat who had ended a three-way war by threatening to get creative. No one knew what that meant, but all three sides had immediately surrendered to each other rather than find out. There was the human scientist who had been studying black holes and accidentally created one while just messing around. The black hole was tiny and harmless, but the fact that a human could create one by accident had terrified every physicist in the galaxy. There was the human tourist who had gone on vacation to a primitive planet and somehow became their supreme ruler in 3 days. When asked how this happened, he said he had just been friendly and helped them fix some stuff. But the worst story was about the human military officer who had been asked to help train a planetary defense force. When enemy pirates attacked the planet 6 months later, they found that the entire population had somehow become expert warriors who fought with a level of tactical intelligence that made no sense. The pirates surrendered without firing a shot and begged to be arrested by the Coalition instead of being left on the planet. "Every human we've ever encountered has been classified as a Category 5 apex predator," Admiral Krex explained. "It doesn't matter if they're scientists, tourists, or diplomats. They're all dangerous. But that's exactly why they might be able to help," the aide said. "If they're so dangerous that we banned them from Coalition space, maybe they're dangerous enough to stop the Korthax." Thane looked around the room. Every face was filled with fear at the thought of contacting Earth. But in those same faces, he could see something else. Hope. Desperate, terrified hope. "The Valerians are pacifists," he said slowly. "They've never hurt anyone. They make art and grow gardens. If we don't help them, they'll all be dead by tomorrow." The room stayed quiet for a long time. Finally, Admiral Krex spoke. "If we contact the humans," he said, "there's no telling what will happen. They might help us. Or they might decide that this whole situation is interesting and make it worse. There are stories about humans doing that too." "What's worse than the Valerians all dying?" Thane asked. No one had an answer for that. Thane walked to the communication console and put his hand on the control that would open a channel to Earth. His hand was shaking. "I'm going to request their most diplomatic and reasonable personnel," he said. "Maybe if we ask nicely, they'll send someone who won't cause too much chaos." He pressed the button before he could change his mind. The message would take 6 hours to reach Earth, and then who knew how long for the humans to respond, if they responded at all. As the communication sent, Thane wondered if he had just saved the Valerians or doomed the entire galaxy. With humans, it was often hard to tell the difference. President Lee Dong-yun was eating lunch in his office in Seoul when the message from the Galactic Coalition arrived. His secretary, a polite woman who had worked for the government for 20 years, knocked on his door with an expression he had never seen before. "Sir," she said carefully, "we have received an official communication from the aliens." Lee Dong-yun almost choked on his rice. In the 50 years since humans had made contact with the galaxy, the aliens had sent exactly 3 messages to Earth. The first was a warning to stay away from their space. The second was a stronger warning to stay away from their space. The third was a threat about what would happen if humans didn't stay away from their space. "Are they angry about something?" he asked, setting down his chopsticks. "I don't think so, sir. They're asking for help." Now Lee Dong-yun was really confused. He followed his secretary to the communications center, where a team of translators and diplomatic experts were gathered around a large screen. They all looked as confused as he felt. "Play the message," he said. The alien on the screen was tall and thin with 4 arms and skin that changed colors. Lee Dong-yun recognized the species. This was a Thane, one of the Coalition's ambassadors. The alien looked nervous and kept glancing off screen as if he was afraid someone might stop him from talking. "Greetings to the government of Earth," the ambassador said. "I am Ambassador Thane of the Galactic Coalition. We are contacting you because we have a situation that requires immediate assistance. A peaceful species called the Valerians is being attacked by an aggressive empire known as the Korthax. All of our military forces have failed to stop them. We are requesting the aid of your most diplomatic and reasonable personnel to help resolve this crisis peacefully." The message continued, with details about the location and the enemy, but Lee Dong-yun stopped listening after the word diplomatic. He started laughing. And once he started, he couldn't stop. "Sir?" his secretary asked, looking worried. "Are you all right?" "They want our most diplomatic people," Lee Dong-hyun said between laughs. "They think we have diplomatic people." The truth was that Earth didn't really have diplomatic people, at least not the kind other species would recognize. Humans had a very different idea of what diplomacy meant. When humans said they were going to solve a problem diplomatically, it usually meant they were going to do something so unexpected and overwhelming that the other side would give up rather than try to figure out what just happened. Lee Dong-yun wiped tears from his eyes and reached for his phone. He dialed a number he knew by heart. "Minho? It's Dong-yun. Are you busy?" Admiral Park. Minho was probably the closest thing Earth had to a normal military officer, which wasn't saying much. He had spent 30 years in space, dealing with situations that most people would consider impossible. He was smart, experienced, and had a talent for finding simple solutions to complicated problems. "Just finishing up some paperwork," Park Minho said. "What's going on?" "The aliens want our help," Lee Dong-yun said. "There's some kind of war happening, and they can't handle it." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "The same aliens who banned us from their space because we're too dangerous?" "The very same ones. They're asking for our most diplomatic personnel." Park Minho started laughing too. "So we're sending our actual problem solvers?" "Every single one of them." Within 2 hours, Park Minho had assembled the team. These were not Earth's diplomats. They were the people Earth sent when diplomacy had already failed and someone needed to fix things quickly. Captain Kim Jae-hoon arrived first. He was a former Special Forces operative who had retired from the military to become what he called a freelance problem solver. His official job was handling security for mining operations in dangerous parts of space, but somehow his assignments always seemed to involve overthrowing corrupt governments or accidentally becoming the leader of rebel movements. He was about 30 years old, average height, and had a friendly smile that made people trust him right up until they realized they had just agreed to something they didn't understand. Dr. Choi Yuna came next. She was a xenobiologist who specialized in studying alien life forms, but her previous job had been as a medic for black operations teams. She had a talent for understanding how different species worked, both biologically and psychologically. She also had a strange habit of adopting dangerous alien creatures as pets. Her apartment in Seoul was home to 3 different species that were officially classified as extremely hazardous to human health. Engineer Woo Tae-hyung was the team's technology expert. He had started his career as a quantum mechanics researcher, but had gotten bored with theoretical work and moved into practical applications. He could build weapons out of spare parts, hack alien computer systems using a calculator and some wire, and had once fixed a broken faster-than-light drive using nothing but kitchen utensils and creative thinking. He was also the only human who had ever made an alien artificial intelligence laugh. Commander Shin Miran was the team's negotiator and psychological warfare specialist. She had a gift for understanding what people wanted and convincing them that they actually wanted something completely different. She could end hostage situations by making the hostage-takers want to surrender to her for their own protection. She had once stopped a civil war by convincing both sides that they were actually fighting the same enemy. Lieutenant Yang Seung-hoon was their pilot. He had grown up mining asteroids in the outer solar system, which meant he could fly anything, with engines and several things without them. He thought of space combat as a fun game, and had never met a maneuver he wouldn't try at least once. He was also the only pilot in Earth's fleet who had ever successfully flown through a black hole's event horizon and come back to tell about it. The team gathered in Park Minho's office to review the mission details. The room was quiet as they Watch the Valerian distress call and the information about the Korthak Empire. So, Kim Ji-hoon said when the briefing was over, the aliens finally need our help. They want us to be diplomatic, Choi Yuna added with a grin. I wonder what they think that means. Probably something boring involving lots of talking and paperwork, Woo Tae-hyung said. Good thing we don't do boring. Shin Miran was studying the tactical reports about the Korthak Empire. They've beaten every military force the coalition has sent against them, overwhelmed their shields, disrupted their weapons, turned their own technology against them. Sounds like they're smart, Yang Sung-hoon said. I like smart enemies. They're more fun to fight. This isn't about fighting, Park Min-ho said firmly. The coalition asked for diplomatic personnel. That's what you are, at least officially. Kim Ji-hoon nodded seriously. Of course. We're going to solve this problem through careful negotiation and cultural understanding. Right, Choi Yuna agreed. I'll make sure to bring my diplomatic medical kit. And I'll pack my diplomatic engineering tools, Woo Tae-hyung added. I'll prepare some diplomatic psychological profiles, Shin Miran said. And I'll plan some diplomatic flight maneuvers, Yang Sung-hoon finished. Park Min-ho looked at his team and shook his head. He had worked with these people for years, and he knew exactly what their version of diplomacy looked like. The galaxy had no idea what it had just asked for. Your ship is the Indomitable, he told them. It's been modified to look like a civilian transport vessel. This was mostly true. The Indomitable did look like a civilian ship from the outside. On the inside, it contained enough weapons to destroy a small moon, defensive systems that could survive flying into a star, and an engine that could outrun anything in known space. It was the kind of ship humans built when they wanted to go somewhere dangerous and come back in one piece. Try not to start an interstellar war, Park Min-ho said as the team prepared to leave. We never start wars, Kim Ji-hoon said innocently. We just finish them. Usually very quickly, Choi Yuna added, and in ways that confuse everyone involved, Woo Tae-hyung said. The important thing is that everyone ends up happy, Shin Miran said. Well, everyone except the bad guys, Yang Sung-hoon clarified. As the team boarded their ship, Park Min-ho called President Lee Dong-yun to give him an update. The team is on their way, he reported. They should reach coalition space in about 6 days. Do you think they can handle this? Lee Dong-yun asked. Park Min-ho thought about the question. Kim Ji-hoon had once ended a planetary revolution by convincing both sides to have a barbecue instead. Choi Yuna had stopped an alien plague by teaching the virus better manners. Woo Tae-hyung had fixed a broken peace treaty by upgrading both sides' technology until they were too busy playing with their new toys to fight. Shin Miran had ended a trade war by making all the participants fall in love with each other. And Yang Sung-hoon had won a space battle by flying his ship in patterns so beautiful that the enemy had stopped shooting to watch. They'll handle it, he said. The question is whether the galaxy will ever be the same afterward. As the Indomitable left Earth's orbit and headed toward the stars, Park Min-ho made a note in his log. Diplomatic mission launched. May God help us all. The Coalition staging area at Hexa Prime was the largest space station in the galaxy. It was built like a small city floating in space with docking bays that could hold 1,000 ships and command centers that could coordinate battles across multiple star systems. Right now, it was buzzing with activity as military commanders from dozens of species tried to figure out how to save the Valerians. None of them were having much success. Ambassador Thane stood in the main command center, watching the tactical displays with growing despair. The red dots representing Korthak ships were moving steadily through Valerian space, destroying everything in their path. The blue dots representing coalition forces were either retreating or disappearing entirely. Status report, he said to Admiral Krex. Not good, the Admiral replied grimly. We've lost contact with the Valerian homeworld. The Korthaks have some kind of jamming technology that blocks all communication. For all we know, the Valerians are already dead. Thane felt sick. It had been 5 days since they sent the message to Earth, and there had been no response. Maybe the humans weren't interested in helping. Maybe they were too busy with their own affairs to care about alien problems. Or maybe they had decided that this situation was too dangerous even for them. Sir, called out the communications officer, a nervous-looking Hexan. I'm detecting a ship approaching from Earth vector. Every alien in the command center froze. After 50 years of avoiding human contact, none of them quite knew what to expect. Put it on the main screen, Thane ordered. The ship that appeared on the display looked disappointingly normal. It was about the size of a medium transport vessel, with clean lines and no visible weapons. It had the words Indomitable painted on its side in simple letters. "That's it?" asked Admiral Krex. "That's what Earth sent to help us?" "Maybe it's bigger on the inside?" suggested someone hopefully. The ship requested permission to dock, using perfectly polite standard galactic protocols. Its pilot had a pleasant voice and seemed to know all the proper procedures. As it settled into Docking Bay 7, crowds of aliens gathered to watch through the observation windows. The airlock opened, and 5 humans stepped out. They looked completely ordinary. The first human was a man of average height wearing casual clothes and a friendly smile. He had dark hair and carried himself with the relaxed confidence of someone who was exactly where he belonged. Behind him came a woman in what looked like a medical uniform, a man carrying a tool kit, another woman in a crisp military-style jacket, and a younger man who kept looking around at everything with obvious curiosity. They looked like tourists. "That's it," Admiral Krex said again. "Those are Earth's most diplomatic personnel?" Ambassador Thane wasn't sure what he had been expecting. Maybe humans in formal diplomatic robes, or at least uniforms that showed they were important. These humans looked like they had just stepped off a civilian transport ship. The lead human approached the security checkpoint with a polite nod to the guards. "Hello," he said in perfect galactic standard. "I'm Captain Kim Ji-hoon from Earth. We're here about the Valerian situation." The security guard, a large reptilian creature with claws like knives, stared down at the small human. "You're the diplomatic team?" "That's us," Kim Ji-hoon said cheerfully. "We're here to help." Behind him, the woman in the medical uniform was already examining the tactical displays with obvious interest. "Cortax," she said thoughtfully. "I've never seen one of those before. Do you have any biological samples?" Dr. Choi Yuna's question made several nearby aliens take a step back. There was something in the way she asked that suggested she was thinking about dissection. The man with the toolkit was studying the energy readings from the Korthak fleet. "Interesting plasma configuration," Wu Tae-hyung said, more to himself than anyone else. "I bet I could make their ships do something funny just by adjusting the quantum frequency of their power cores." He said this in the same tone someone might use to discuss the weather. Several coalition engineers who overheard him looked at each other in alarm. "Quantum frequency adjustment isn't possible," one of them said. "The energy requirements alone would—" Wu Tae-hyung looked at him with genuine confusion. "Really? But it's so simple. You just need to convince the plasma that it wants to be somewhere else." "Convince the plasma?" "Sure. Everything wants to be happy. Even subatomic particles." The coalition engineers decided to back away slowly. Ambassador Thane approached the human team with careful steps. These humans might look normal, but the stories about their species were still fresh in his mind. "Captain Kim," he said formally, "we are grateful that Earth has responded to our request for assistance. However, I must emphasize that this is an extremely dangerous situation. The Korthak Empire has defeated every military force we have sent against them." Kim Ji-hoon nodded seriously. "We understand. That's why we're here. The Korthaks have superior technology, overwhelming firepower, and tactical systems that have never been defeated," Thane continued. "They have already destroyed 3 coalition fleets." "That does sound challenging," the woman in the military jacket said. Commander Shin Miran was listening with the focused attention of someone solving an interesting puzzle. "Have you tried asking them to stop?" The command center went completely silent. Ambassador Thane stared at her. "I'm sorry, what?" "Have you tried asking them to stop?" she repeated patiently. "You know, diplomatic communication." "Please don't kill these people. We'd rather you didn't." That's not how warfare works," Admiral Krex said slowly. Shin Miran tilted her head. "Really? How do you usually handle conflicts then?" "We fight them," Krex explained, as if speaking to a child. "With weapons and tactics and military strategy." "Oh," she said, looking genuinely surprised. "You've been doing it wrong then." The silence stretched even longer. Finally, the young pilot spoke up. "This is a really nice station," Yang Sung-hoon said, looking around appreciatively. "Good construction, excellent defensive positioning. Though if I were attacking it, I'd probably come in from below the orbital plane during a solar storm to mask my approach, then use the gravity well to slingshot into close range before anyone could react." He pointed to different parts of the station as he spoke, describing attack vectors and defensive weaknesses as casually as giving directions to a restaurant. The station's military commanders exchanged worried looks. "But that's just theoretical," Yang Sung-hoon added quickly. "I'm sure no one would actually try something like that." Ambassador Thane was beginning to understand why the galaxy found humans so disturbing. It wasn't that they were obviously dangerous, it was that they were completely unpredictable. They looked harmless, acted friendly, and said things that made experienced military officers break out in cold sweats. "Perhaps we should brief you on the current situation," he said carefully. The humans were led to the main briefing room, where holographic displays showed the current state of the battle. The Korthak fleet was represented by angry red symbols, moving through Valerian space like a disease. Coalition forces appeared as scattered blue dots, most of them either fleeing or already destroyed. "The Korthaks began their attack 6 days ago," Admiral Krex explained. "They have approximately 200 ships, all heavily armed and shielded. Their flagship is a massive dreadnought that appears to be immune to our weapons." Dr. Choi Yuna was studying the biological data on the Korthaks. "Aggressive species," she noted. "High levels of adrenaline, enhanced muscle density, redundant nervous systems. But look at these nutritional readings. They are deficient in several key minerals. That could be causing psychological instability." "You can tell all that from sensor readings?" asked the Coalition's chief medical officer. "Sure," Choi Yuna said. "It's basic xenobiology, though I'd need to run some tests to be certain. Do you think they'd hold still long enough for me to take some samples?" The medical officer stared at her. "You want to take biological samples from the Korthaks? While they're attacking people?" "Well, it would be easier if they weren't moving around so much," she admitted. Engineer Woo Tae-hyung was examining the technical specifications of the Korthak weapons. "These plasma cannons are interesting," he said. "But the power distribution is all wrong. They're wasting at least 30% of their energy output, and their shield harmonics are completely out of phase." "What does that mean?" asked the Coalition's chief engineer. "It means their ships should be exploding every time they fire their weapons," Woo Tae-hyung said. "The fact that they're not suggests they have some kind of compensatory system, probably automated, which means it can be hacked." "Hacked? From here?" "Oh no, I'd need to get much closer, preferably inside their computer network. Maybe I could send them a virus disguised as a software update." Commander Shin Miran was reading psychological profiles of the Korthak leadership. "Interesting culture," she said. "Very hierarchical, based on personal combat ability. But look at these family structures. They're actually quite social. I bet they're lonely." "Lonely?" Admiral Krex repeated. "Sure. All this aggression and conquest. Classic symptoms of a species that feels isolated and misunderstood. They probably just need some friends." Lieutenant Yang Sung-hoon was studying the fleet movements and tactical patterns. "Their formation is pretty good," he said admiringly. "Very disciplined, excellent coordination, but they're predictable." The human team returned to their ship to plan their approach. Captain Kim Ji-hoon gathered his people in the small meeting room aboard the Indomitable, while the Coalition forces watched nervously from the station. "All right," Kim Ji-hoon said, sitting down at the table. "We have a standard diplomatic situation. Aggressive species attacking peaceful species, superior enemy technology, and local military forces that have already failed. Suggestions?" Dr. Choi Yuna was the first to speak. "I've been thinking about those biological readings. The Korthaks are showing signs of severe mineral deficiency, particularly iron and magnesium. That could explain their aggressive behavior. It's probably affecting their brain chemistry." "So they're attacking people because they need vitamins?" Woo Tae-hyung asked. "More or less. If I could treat the deficiency, they might calm down significantly." "How would you treat 200 ships worth of angry aliens?" Shin Miran asked. "Choi," Yuna smiled. "I've been working on some new medical nanites, tiny robots that can adjust brain chemistry. I could probably deliver them through their air recycling systems." Kim Ji-hoon nodded. "That's good. What else? Woo Tae-hyung pulled out his tablet and showed them the technical specifications he had studied. Their computer systems are impressive but not very secure. I could probably hack into their network and cause some helpful malfunctions. Helpful how? Well, I could make their weapons think they're pointed the wrong way, or convince their navigation computers that they're lost, or maybe just give them better entertainment systems so they get distracted. Entertainment systems? Everyone likes good music, even angry aliens. Commander Shin Miran had been reviewing the psychological profiles. I've been analyzing their communication patterns. The Korthaks respond well to direct authority figures, but they've been isolated from other species for decades. They probably don't understand that other people have feelings. So they're not evil, just ignorant? Kim Ji-hoon asked. Probably. Most aggressive behavior comes from fear or misunderstanding. If I could talk to them individually, explain things from the victim's perspective, they might change their minds. Lieutenant Yang Sung-hoon had been studying star charts. I could keep their attention focused on me while you all work. Run interference, basically. Maybe do some fancy flying to confuse their targeting systems. How fancy? Kim Ji-hoon asked. Yang Sung-hoon grinned. Ever seen someone fly a figure-8 pattern through an asteroid field while being chased by 200 angry warships? I don't think anyone has seen that. Well, they're about to. Kim Ji-hoon looked around the table at his team. Each of them was proposing to do something that the coalition would consider impossible. But he had worked with these people for years, and he knew they could deliver on their promises. All right, he said. Let's go solve this diplomatically. The Kyobo team split up to handle different aspects of the problem. The first step was getting close enough to the Korthak fleet to implement their solutions. Kim Ji-hoon walked back to the Coalition Command Center and asked to speak with Admiral Krex privately. I need permission to approach the Korthak flagship for direct negotiations, he said. Admiral Krex stared at him. You want to fly up to their command ship and knock on the door? More or less. They'll destroy you before you get within 1,000 kilometers. Probably not, Kim Ji-hoon said confidently. Humans have a reputation in this galaxy. They'll want to see what I'm going to do. And what are you going to do? Kim Ji-hoon smiled. Talk to them. While Kim Ji-hoon was making arrangements, Dr. Choi Yuna was in the Indomitable's medical bay, preparing her nanites. These were not the simple medical robots used by most species. Human nanites were more advanced, capable of making complex decisions and adapting to different biological systems. Computer, she said to the ship's AI, I need to synthesize enough medical nanites to treat approximately 50,000 Korthak soldiers for severe mineral deficiency. That would require significant raw materials, the computer replied. Use the ship's backup supply reserves. We won't need them after this mission. Are you certain? The nanites you're describing would be capable of altering brain chemistry. That's the idea. Don't worry, I've programmed them to be helpful. Meanwhile, engineer Woo Tae-hyung was working on his hacking tools. He connected his tablet to the ship's quantum communication array and began writing programs that no other species would consider possible. Let's see, he muttered to himself. I'll need a virus that can convince plasma cannons they're actually flower arrangers, a Trojan horse that makes shield generators think they're air fresheners, and maybe something that turns their tacticals computers into music players. He paused and looked at his code. Actually, that music player idea isn't bad. I'll add some really good songs to their database. Everyone deserves good music. Commander Shin Miran was preparing for what she called aggressive therapy. She had spent the morning researching Korthak culture, family structures, and social dynamics. Now she was writing personal messages to individual Korthak soldiers based on their psychological profiles. Computer, I need access to the Coalition's intelligence database on Korthak personnel. That information is classified. I'm conducting diplomatic outreach. I need to know who I'm talking to. Processing. Access granted. Warning. This database contains personal information on approximately 50,000 individuals. Perfect. Start with the ship commanders and work your way down. Lieutenant Yang Sung-hoon was in the pilot's seat, planning flight patterns that would have made any sane pilot quit their job. He was calculating trajectories that involved flying through gravity wells, using solar wind as a brake, and performing turns that required the ship to be in 3 different places at the same time. Computer, can this ship survive flying through the corona of a star? Briefly, yes. What about flying backwards through hyperspace? That is not recommended. But is it possible? Theoretically. Great. Add it to the flight plan. After 6 hours of preparation, the team was ready to begin their diplomatic mission. Kim Ji-hoon sent a message to the Korthak flagship requesting permission to board for negotiations. The response came back immediately. Approach if you dare, human. We will speak with you before we kill you. See? Kim Ji-hoon said to Admiral Krex. They want to talk. They want to kill you. Same thing, really. The important part is that they're interested. The Indomitable undocked from the station and began flying toward the Korthak fleet. As soon as they entered the battle zone, alarms started going off all over the ship. Multiple targeting locks detected, the computer announced calmly. Ignore them, Yang Sung-hoon said, taking the controls. They're just saying hello. He began flying the ship in a pattern that looked completely random, but was actually carefully calculated to confuse enemy targeting systems. The ship twisted and turned through space like a leaf in the wind, but always moved closer to the Korthak flagship. Dr. Choi Yuna activated her nanites and released them into the ship's exhaust system. They would spread through space and infiltrate the Korthak ship's air recycling systems within the hour. Woo Tae-hyung connected his hacking tools to the ship's communication array and began broadcasting his viruses. They were disguised as routine maintenance updates, the kind of boring system messages that computer operators usually ignored. Commander Shin Miran opened communication channels to individual Korthak ships and began sending personal messages. Each message was tailored to a specific soldier, addressing their personal concerns and fears. As the Indomitable approached the flagship, Kim Ji-hoon straightened his casual jacket and prepared for the most important conversation of his career. Remember, he said to his team, we're here to solve this diplomatically. Right, Choi Yuna said, monitoring her nanite's progress. Diplomatic medicine. Diplomatic hacking, Woo Tae-hyung added, watching his viruses spread through the enemy. Network. Diplomatic therapy, Shin Miran said, continuing to send personal messages. Diplomatic flying, Yang Sung-hoon said, performing a barrel roll that somehow dodged 6 different weapons at once. As they approached the massive Korthak dreadnought, Kim Ji-hoon wondered if the galaxy was ready for human diplomacy. Probably not, he decided. But the Valerians needed help, and that was what mattered. The airlock sealed behind him as he prepared to board the enemy flagship. Through the ship's communication system, he could hear his team continuing their work. Nanites at 20% dispersal, Choi Yuna reported. First wave of viruses successfully deployed, Woo Tae-hyung announced. 15 ships have responded to personal messages, Shin Miran said. They seem confused but interested. Still haven't been shot down, Yang Sung-hoon added cheerfully. Kim Ji-hoon smiled and stepped onto the Korthak ship. Time for some human diplomacy. The inside of the Korthak flagship was exactly what Kim Ji-hoon had expected. Dark, imposing, and designed to intimidate. The corridors were wide enough for the 7-foot-tall Korthak warriors, with metal walls covered in what looked like battle trophies from conquered worlds. Red lighting gave everything an angry, hostile appearance. Kim Ji-hoon walked calmly through the ship, escorted by 6 heavily armed Korthak soldiers who looked like they wanted to kill him, but weren't sure if they were allowed to yet. He kept his hands relaxed at his sides and hummed quietly to himself, a habit that usually made aliens nervous. The bridge of the ship was a massive room filled with weapon controls, tactical displays, and view screens showing the ongoing battle. In the center of it all sat Admiral Grax, the destroyer, the leader of the Korthak fleet. He was enormous even by Korthak standards, covered in thick armor-like skin and scars from countless battles. His eyes glowed red in the dim lighting, and, when he spoke, his voice sounded like grinding metal. So, Grax rumbled, Earth finally sends someone to face us. Are you here to surrender on behalf of your pathetic coalition? Kim Ji-hoon looked around the bridge with obvious interest, then pulled out a small device and began making tea. The Korthak stared in amazement as he calmly set up a portable heating element and prepared 2 cups. Nice ship, he said conversationally, as if he was visiting a friend's house. Very impressive. Must be expensive to maintain. What are you doing? Grax demanded. Making tea. Would you like some? It's green tea from Earth. Very relaxing." The entire bridge went silent. Grax stared at the small human who had just walked onto his warship and started making beverages. "You came here to make tea?" he asked incredulously. "Well, that and to chat," Kim Ji-hoon said, stirring his cup. "I thought we should talk before things get out of hand." "Out of hand? We are conquering this system. We have already destroyed your coalition fleets." "Yes, I heard about that. Very thorough work. But I was wondering, why are you doing this?" Grax blinked, confused by the question. "We are Korthax. We conquer because we are strong." "Sure. But why these particular people? The Valerians are pacifists. They make art and grow gardens. They don't have anything you usually want." While Kim Ji-hoon was having his conversation, his team was continuing their work throughout the Korthak fleet. Dr. Choi Yuna's medical nanites were spreading through the ship's air systems, reaching Korthak soldiers and quietly adjusting their brain chemistry. The tiny robots were designed to correct the mineral deficiencies that were causing the species' aggressive behavior. On ship after ship, Korthak warriors began to feel different. The constant anger that had driven them for their entire lives started to fade. They looked around at their weapons and battle stations and wondered why they had seemed so important. "Why are we doing this again?" one soldier asked his commander. Because we're Korthax," the commander replied, but he sounded uncertain. "But what's the point? These Valerians haven't done anything to us." The commander found that he didn't have a good answer. Meanwhile, engineer Wu Tae-hyung's computer viruses were causing creative problems throughout the fleet. Weapons systems began malfunctioning in helpful ways. Plasma cannons that fired pretty, light shows instead of destructive beams, missile launchers that shot confetti, and shield generators that created rainbow-colored barriers. "Sir," a Korthak technician reported to his captain, "our main guns are playing music." "What kind of music?" "It's actually quite good, sir. Very relaxing." The captain listened to the gentle melody coming from their weapon systems and found himself feeling unexpectedly peaceful. Commander Shin Miran's personal messages were having their own effect. Across the fleet, individual Korthak soldiers were receiving communications that addressed their specific fears and concerns. Warrior Krell read one message. "I know you joined the military to provide for your family back on the homeworld. I know you worry about them every day. What if I told you there was a way to ensure their safety and happiness without requiring you to hurt innocent people?" Krell stared at his screen in amazement. How did this alien know about his family? How? Did she know he sent half his pay home to support his elderly parents? He read the message again, then forwarded it to his friends. Within an hour, hundreds of Korthak soldiers were discussing this mysterious human who seemed to understand them better than their own commanders did. Lieutenant Yang Sung-hoon was providing a distraction by flying the Indomitable in patterns that should have been impossible. He looped around Korthak ships, flew between their formations, and performed aerobatic maneuvers that made their targeting computers give up in confusion. "How is he doing that?" demanded the Korthak fleet tactical officer. "I don't know, sir. His ship appears to be in 17 different locations simultaneously." "That's impossible." "Yes, sir. But he's doing it anyway." Back on the flagship, Admiral Grax was getting increasingly frustrated with Kim Ji-hoon's casual attitude. "You think you can intimidate the Korthak Empire with beverage service?" he roared. "Oh no," Kim Ji-hoon said, sipping his tea calmly. "This is just social time. The intimidation started when my engineer friend began playing with your power grid." As if on cue, every light on the ship flickered. In the distance, they could see explosions of light throughout the fleet as other ships experienced technical difficulties. "My doctor friend is currently curing your species' aggression disorder," Kim Ji-hoon continued conversationally. "My communications specialist has convinced about half your fleet that they'd rather be doing something else with their lives. And my pilot is having a lovely time confusing your tactical computers." Grax looked at his tactical displays in growing horror. It was all true. Half his ships were reporting equipment malfunctions, his soldiers were sending him requests for leave time, and that impossible human ship was still flying circles around his entire fleet. "What do you want?" Grax growled. "I want you to stop attacking the Valerians," Kim Ji-hoon said simply. "They're nice people who've never hurt anyone. This whole war is pointless. We are Korthax. We do not stop. But why not? What are you getting?" out of this. Grax opened his mouth to give the traditional answer about strength and conquest, but found that he couldn't remember why those things mattered. The anger that had driven him his entire life was fading, replaced by something he had never felt before: doubt. We are warriors," he said uncertainly. "Sure. But you could be warriors who protect people instead of killing them. That would be much more impressive." Kim Ji-hoon set down his teacup and activated his communicator. "Computer, show Admiral Grax the current tactical situation." The main screen lit up with an image that made every Korthak on the bridge step backward in terror. It showed Earth's actual military fleet departing from Sol System, hundreds of dark ships moving in formations that hurt to look at directly. "Here's the thing," Kim Ji-hoon said pleasantly. "We're the diplomatic team. We're here to talk and find peaceful solutions. But back on Earth, we have people who are actually designed for warfare. They're on their way here now, just in case our conversation doesn't go well." The ships on the screen moved with a predatory grace that made it clear they were not designed for exploration or defense. They were pure instruments of war built by a species that had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of violence. "Those ships," Kim Ji-hoon continued, "are crewed by humans who think that negotiations are boring and would prefer to solve this problem more directly. They should arrive in about 6 hours. Grax stared at the screen in growing panic. If these small humans could disable his entire fleet with tea and conversation, what could Earth's actual warriors do? What do you want us to do?" he asked. Kim Ji-hoon smiled and pulled out a data pad. "I've prepared a simple agreement. You stop attacking the Valerians, provide compensation for the damage you've caused, accept treatment for your aggression, disorder, and agree to human oversight of your future expansion activities. And if we refuse?" Kim Ji-hoon glanced at the screen showing Earth's military fleet. "Then you get to meet my colleagues who handle problems that can't be solved diplomatically." Grax looked around his bridge at his officers. The red glow of anger was fading from their eyes, replaced by something that looked almost like sanity. His weapons officer was humming along with the music coming from the plasma cannons. His tactical officer was reading personal messages from a human who seemed to understand his deepest fears. His engineering staff was trying to figure out how their computers had learned to play games. "How long do we have to decide?" he asked. "Oh, you've already decided," Kim Ji-hoon said cheerfully. "Look around." Grax realized he was right. Across his entire fleet, Korthak soldiers were laying down their weapons, sending messages home to their families, and wondering why they had ever thought conquest was a good idea. Dr. Choi Yuna's nanites had done their work well. "The treatment for our condition," Grax said slowly. "It's permanent? Only if you want it to be. But I think you'll find that life is much more interesting when you're not constantly angry." For the first time in his adult life, Admiral Grax felt something other than rage. It was a strange sensation, but not unpleasant. He looked at the tactical display showing the beautiful blue planet where the Valerians lived, and instead of seeing a target to destroy, he saw The Galactic Coalition Emergency Council was called into session exactly 18 hours after the humans had docked at Hexa Prime. Ambassador Thane stood at the center of the Great Chamber, looking at representatives from 200 different species, all of whom had the same expression of confused amazement. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," said Ambassador Vesk, his reptilian face showing more emotion than anyone had ever seen from his species. "The humans solved the crisis." "Yes," Thane replied. "The entire crisis. Yes. In less than 1 day. 17 hours and 23 minutes to be precise. And there were no casualties among our forces. None whatsoever. And the Korthak Empire has not only agreed to stop their attacks, but has requested to join the coalition as peaceful members. They submitted their application this morning." The chamber erupted in voices speaking dozens of different languages, all expressing the same basic sentiment. This should not have been possible. Admiral Krex stood up from his seat, his military uniform looking somehow smaller than it had yesterday. The Korthak fleet powered down all weapons at 1400 hours. Their Admiral Grax sent a personal apology to the Valerian Council and offered to help rebuild everything they had damaged. They've also requested medical treatment for what they're calling their temporary insanity. Medical treatment? Asked the Coalition's chief medical officer. The human doctor, Choi Yuna, explained that the Korthaks were suffering from a biological disorder that caused excessive aggression. She's already cured it using some kind of nanite therapy. The entire Korthak population is now about 40% less violent and 60% smarter. She uplifted an entire species? Someone gasped. Accidentally, she claims. Says it was a side effect of correcting their brain chemistry. What about their technology? Asked the chief engineer. Admiral Krex consulted his reports. Their computer systems have been improved. The human engineer, Woo Tae-hyung, left behind what he called helpful upgrades. Their ships now run more efficiently. Their weapons have safety features that prevent them from being used against civilian targets. And their entertainment systems are apparently the best in the galaxy. Their weapons have safety features? The plasma cannons refuse to fire at anything that isn't actively shooting back. The missile systems automatically redirect any shots that might harm non-combatants, and their shields now change color based on the crew's mood. What about their military tactics? Asked the Coalition's strategic planning officer. That's where it gets interesting, Admiral Krex said. The human pilot, Yang Sung-hoon, gave flying lessons to their entire fighter wing. They can now perform maneuvers that our physics department says should be impossible. However, they're only using these skills for exploration and rescue missions. Ambassador Thane cleared his throat to get everyone's attention. There's more. The human communications specialist, Shin Miran, conducted what she called aggressive therapy on the entire Korthak population. They've apparently resolved decades of cultural trauma and are now one of the most psychologically healthy species in the galaxy. And the human captain? Someone asked. Kim Ji-hoon, Thane said, consulting his notes. He had tea with Admiral Grax and somehow convinced him that conquest was boring. The entire negotiation took 17 minutes. The chamber fell silent again. Finally, an elderly ambassador from the core world spoke up. These were their diplomats? She asked weakly. According to Earth, yes. Their most reasonable and diplomatic personnel? That's what they sent us. Then what are their actual warriors like? No one answered that question. No one wanted to think about it. On the Valerian homeworld, the celebration was just beginning. The peaceful insectoid people emerged from their underground shelters to find their planet intact and their attackers gone. But more than that, they found that the galaxy had changed. Elder Kithara, who had sent the original distress call, stood in her garden and looked up at the stars. Ships were arriving from all over the galaxy. Not warships, but rescue vessels and construction crews. The Korthaks had kept their promise and were helping to repair the minimal damage their attack had caused. Elder, said one of her assistants, a young Valerian named Thais. The human ship is requesting permission to visit. The surface? Of course, Kithara said. We owe them everything. The Indomitable landed in the garden with surprising gentleness. The 5 humans who emerged looked exactly the same as when they had left Earth. Casual, friendly, and completely ordinary. Captain Kim Ji-hoon approached Elder Kithara with a polite bow. We wanted to make sure you were all right, he said. And to apologize for any inconvenience. Inconvenience? Kithara stared at him. You saved our entire species. Well, yes, but the whole thing probably caused a lot of stress. We know how upsetting it can be when strangers show up and start changing things. Dr. Choi Yuna was already examining the local plant life with obvious delight. Your terraforming work is incredible, she told Thais. Would you mind if I took some samples? I'd like to see if we can adapt your techniques for other worlds. You want to learn from us? Thais asked in amazement. Of course. Just because we solved one little problem doesn't mean we know everything. Engineer Woo Tae-hyung was looking at the Valerian technology with interest. Your energy systems are very elegant, he said to the local engineers. Much more efficient than what most species use. I could show you a few tricks to make them even better, if you'd like. Commander Shin. Miran was talking with a group of young Valerians about their art and culture. Your approach to conflict resolution is fascinating, she said. We could learn a lot from your peaceful traditions. Lieutenant Yang Sung-hoon was examining the landing field with a pilot's eye. Nice location for a spaceport, he commented. With a few improvements, you could handle much larger ships. I could help design something that wouldn't disturb your gardens. Elder Cathera listened to the humans talking and realized something remarkable. They weren't acting like conquerors or heroes. They were acting like neighbors. "Captain Kim," she said carefully, "may I ask you something?" "Of course. Why did you help us? We're not part of your species. We have nothing to offer Earth." Kim Ji-hoon looked genuinely confused by the question. "You asked for help," he said simply. "People were being hurt, and you needed assistance. Why wouldn't we help?" "But the cost, the risk, the effort. What cost? We were just doing our jobs. And it wasn't that difficult, really. The Korthax just needed some medical attention and someone to explain things to them properly." Cathara stared at him. "You call that not difficult?" "Well, nobody died. Nobody got seriously hurt. The problem got solved, and everyone ended up happier than when we started. That's pretty much the best possible outcome for any diplomatic mission." Across the galaxy, word of the human intervention was spreading. The story grew with each telling, but somehow the core facts remained the same. Earth had sent 5 ordinary people who had solved an impossible problem using methods that no one could quite understand. On Earth, President Lee Dong-yun was reading reports from the mission with a mixture of pride and concern. "They cured an entire species' mental illness?" he asked Admiral Park Min-ho. "Apparently, Choi Yuna says it was just basic medical care. And Tae-hyung upgraded their entire technological base? He calls it fixing a few bugs. Says their computers were running inefficiently." "What about Moran's psychological intervention?" She describes it as helping people talk through their problems. Apparently, the entire Korthax civilization had unresolved trauma issues, and Sung-hoon taught them advanced piloting. He says they were eager students and very polite, and Ji-hoon negotiated the surrender of a species that had never been defeated in battle. Park Min-ho shrugged. He made tea and asked them nicely to stop fighting. President Lee Dong-yun set down the reports and looked out his window at the city of Seoul. In the distance, he could see the space elevators that connected Earth to the orbital shipyards where humanity's real military forces were built. "Min-ho," he said quietly, "do you think the galaxy understands what just happened?" "I don't think we understand what just happened," Park Min-ho replied. "But I know one thing. Our reputation as the galaxy's scariest species just got a lot worse." "How so?" "Before this, aliens were afraid of us because they thought we were dangerous. Now they're afraid of us because they know we can solve any problem, fix any crisis, and make anyone happy whether they want us to or not. And that's worse? Think about it. Before, they could avoid us. Now they know that if they have any problem at all, the logical solution is to call Earth. But they also know that if they call Earth, we'll solve the problem in ways they can't predict or control." President Lee Dong-hyun thought about this for a moment, then started laughing. "What's so funny?" Park Min-ho asked. "We just became the galaxy's emergency services department. Every crisis, every impossible situation, every problem that nobody else can handle, they're all going to end up on our desk. Is that a good thing?" Lee Dong-yun looked at the reports again, thinking about 5 ordinary humans who had saved an entire species before lunch and made friends with their enemies by tea time. "Ask me in a few years," he said. "But I suspect it's going to be very interesting." In the depths of space, the Korthak fleet was making its way toward the Coalition.